This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So far. Fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch, episode 11, covering The Way of the Ronin from 2010. It happened on September 26, 2010 from the Miramar Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am one of your hosts, Iron Mike Spears, your old pal. How's it going, everyone? And we are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You could find us on the Voices of Wrestling feed or on the Open the Voice Gate RSS feed on every platform and application possible. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. With that all being said, I am joined as always by my good friend Case Lowe and co-host, and also we have a special guest this week, Case.
We do indeed. Nothing is there's no more fitting way to send off Bryan Danielson on his Dragon Gate USA journey. There is no better way to celebrate a Dragon Gate USA show of such stature without having a special guest aboard to talk about this show.
That's right. And we have someone who was at the Miramar Theater on September 26, 2010. One of 200 people from a sold-out Miramar Theater. It is Kelly Harris. Kelly, how's it going?
It's going great. If you're watching the show, you can find me wearing a Tyler Black shirt.
You know, like that was the thing. Like I was trying to like find people in the crowd with this show with the lights because how compressed it was, and I didn't know necessarily what T-shirt you were wearing. So I was like going, which T-shirt do I think Kelly could be wearing right now, and which one it was. But there was someone in a Sinestro T-shirt, which knowing you, I was like that could be Kelly, but I don't think so. So all right, so Tyler Black T-shirt. Next time I rewatch it.
Sitting next to me was my dad in the baby blue Sweet and Sour Ink shirt.
Well, I mean that's a
very solid combination.
Yeah, solid. Combination here. So this week we are going to be talking about Way of the Ronin. It was their first show in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It came after the show that happened the night before in Chicago, the Untouchable 2010 show, and not much of news we really wanted to get into, Case, but there were two big things that we wanted to have Kelly on to talk about since he was there live.
Yeah, not only is this the final Dragon Gate USA appearance for Bryan Danielson, as I mentioned earlier, but this show almost either did not happen or happened in a drastically altered state, we'll say, as the ring, the all-important wrestling ring, did not show up to the venue in time. Now, if you're a Dragon Gate historian, you might know the August 9th, 2008 Summer Adventure Tag League show in Cork and Hall, in which Dragon Gate had shipped over an American-made ring to Japan, and in the dark match of that show, the ring broke, and instead of canceling a sold-out Cork and Hall, Dragon Gate simply taped the mats to the floor and proceeded to have a full wrestling event with no ring. They were doing this before indies across America ruined the idea. Dragon Gate made it very, very cool. This situation almost happened in Milwaukee, but luckily at the last minute, a ring was delivered to the venue. Thus, we were able to have professional wrestling as we know it.
And Kelly, being at the show, they made a big note on the show that the show started late. How was it like everyone just waiting around while this was happening? Like, I mean, I assume no one was being led into the Miramar Theater before the ring showed up.
Yeah, no, we were all just in line outside. And so at first there's Five Guys down the road. So we went there and we sat at the table next to Bryce. And you could kind of tell the way he was talking to people, like looking back now, it's like, seemed kind of tense. So he may have known what was going on and they were kind of worrying about it. But so after we ate, we went down to the venue when the doors should have been opening like right around then, because we had we were in the golden circle.
Oh, so you
of
got to
course-
see the bonus card, or what was going to be the bonus card.
Yeah. So we had, our seats already picked out. So we were like, we don't need to be there right when the doors open. But so we walk by, and there's still this huge line. And I noticed like, oh, is that Gabe? And Gabe's walking up and down the line. And once he gets to us, he tells us, the ring isn't here. We're still waiting. So, we can't let anyone in right now, but it'll be here soon. And he's very flustered, as Gabe's going to be.
I was gonna say, did Gabe say it as calmly as that, or was he saying, "There's no ring right now. There will be a ring. Please, if you're a Golden Circle member, relax. There will be a ring." It makes sense that was more what Gabe was doing rather than calmly explaining the situation.
But I made him feel a little better, because back then he and I were MySpace friends.
Okay.
So I knew it was his birthday, so I wished him a happy birthday.
Oh, very nice.
So, but that also meant then that he would, as he was going up and down the line, he'd stop and talk to me and my parents longer than anyone else. So we got a little bit more out of him at the time. So I don't know. I've never heard like what the official story of what happened with the ring is, but this is what he told us. Apparently the ring driver was jumped the night before and was in the hospital, and no one knew until midday.
Oh wow, that is. I remember hearing that a rumor of like it getting like carjacked and jumped. There was the other rumor that it was supposed to be a Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney's ring, which at that time he was someone that was going through some issues, and Gabe always kind of looked out for him a little bit, and I was like that, but. They've never really truly said what happened to this first ring.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. I'd never heard that about Larry Sweeney, so maybe.
Yeah, look, because this was during the time that, just as a friend of reference, people like Larry Sweeney is someone who was manic depressant and was having very tough go. He left Chikara, he left Ring of Honor, and kind of was floating around and did like random appearances, and it seemed like that Gabe was like trying to like look out for him in a little bit of way, and then someone, I don't remember who even like spread this rumor, and of course I don't want to speak of Larry Sweeney now, but that was like one thing that went along, was like, oh yeah, he was supposed to have the ring and it didn't show up. I remember like hearing about this when it happened, and already being a Dragon Gate fan, I was like, so they're gonna go get Matt's right, and then I've like looked, I went back and looked on the Observer and Figure 4 Weekly, and they were talking about how it was a disaster. The Dragon Gate guys said that they were going to like go to Lowe's and just get like, I guess like plyboard and some insulation foam and maybe a tarp and do it that way, which, as Case mentioned, like that would have been very true to the form. It would have been the only thing that would have been more improv than when the ring broke. It turns out that the new ring that they found was one by Ratchke Brown, which was something that like was another blast from the past, because I know that isn't Brown like I know that you're Wisconsin based. Isn't like Brown like someone that runs shows in the area, or at least would at one time?
Yeah, he's a local guy. So yeah, they just pretty much found whoever was closest that had a ring that they could get to. So yeah, they had him bring it in. But like at one point when Gabe was talking to me and my parents, he's like, yeah, the Dragon Gate guys said they'd be okay doing the show without the ring. He's like, the American guys want us to wait.
Can you imagine Kamikaze USA rolling up to a Lowe's and just grabbing plywood and whatever else they can to have a show, a show with no ring? I mean, that if Shingo is coming to a Home Depot near me, he is getting my utmost service and respect. Whatever he needs, it goes on my card. You don't have to worry about it, Mr. Takagi.
Yeah, and at one point, Gabe comes out and tells us, hey, there's a ring on the way. And, everyone cheers. So we're still waiting. A little while after that, Jimmy Jacobs comes sprinting out of the venue and just runs down the street. We don't see him again until the show starts. So I don't know if someone got lost or whatever. But a couple minutes after that, the ring truck showed up, and then the Dragon Gate roster just pours out of the venue, and they all start grabbing stuff and bringing it into the venue. And I don't know, maybe 20 minutes later we got in. Like, it was extremely fast.
I thought you were going to say Jimmy Jacobs started singing to you guys, which I was going to feel really bad for you. But I guess if he's running away, that's good for something.
Yeah, no, he at that point, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone go that fast.
It makes me wonder, like, did he think that Rashki like was lost, or he was like, all right, I'm going to direct this in?
Yeah, it had to have been like took a wrong turn or something. Because like in that area where it is, there's a lot of one-way streets.
Mm.
So like I don't know if maybe he just ended up going the wrong way or something.
It's just and like the thing that like really gets me is most of the Dragon Gate guys, they basically run as a co-op, so they all set up the ring, they all do like this, so they were all pretty fine. I'm just imagining like, and I'd imagine that some of the indie folks were used to it. I'm just imagining someone like Chuck Taylor, who is someone who's done like backyard shows, going like, well, I thought this was my big break, but I guess I'm putting together a ring now. That's something. And then like Bryan Danielson, just like at this time was already back in WWE with that like tier of, I don't want to say professionalism because that's unfair to DGUSA, but like that tier of production. And then it's like, oh yeah, Bryan Danielson, this is your last show on the Indies. Guess what? You're helping us put together, or as he said later on in the show, he did not put together the ring. He claimed vet card there. It's just like such a wild situation. And, you know, for DGUSA, it just like seems like that these things just start happening more and more. And this is like one of the ones like, well, the ring didn't show up, so they had to get a big ring, a new ring. And it just was one of those things in retrospect makes me think how snake bit, at least for a while, this promotion was.
And this also kind of made me realize that, like, I still don't think I fully understand how rings are carted around, because it's like they still had the ring mat and the turnbuckle pads, which is something I would normally assume would just get transported along with the ring itself.
Yeah, I think the thing, because I remember on MySpace with Gabe back in nicer times between people and people I've done the shows with, and Gabe Sapolsky, I remember him like talking about like how proud he was of the ring apron he got for Dragon Gate USA, and it was a cool ring, I guess.
Yeah.
And knowing how things would go for Gabe and WWN Promotions in the future, I guess it seems like that you wouldn't want to have like a ring truck unless it's somewhere within like your availability, so you would get someone to come bring in the ring. Like I suspected that for like whenever they mention a promotional partner, that pretty much tells me, oh, they're using their ring, and I guess whatever, like steps and whatever for them. So I guess whoever, and there was not one announced for Milwaukee, so I guess wherever he got the ring from, there was all those issues, and Rashki Brown came in. I mean, I was kind of surprised with all of that Rashki Brown didn't find his way on this card because of, he brought over the ring. Usually that means you get on the show one way or the other.
Normally that's how you get booked. I mean, if you're a subpar wrestler, buy a ring, it will get you bookings. I know two things. Well, I know one thing for sure, which is that I know Gabe loved the DGUSA ring skirt and the canvas and the way it looked. I know wrestlers hated it because the red on the canvas would stain their gear. So I think it's Brian Kendrick maybe who, maybe it's WrestleMania weekend. You can see on the second night, he clearly has like pink stains on his gear. It's some wrestler on the back end of a double shot. You can clearly see that like the ring has left their mark on the attire. And that's something that Johnny Gargano talked about when he did his Kayfabe commentaries interview with Gabe, was that, you know, it looked so good because Gabe makes mention of it when they're watching the fray match from the first DGUSA shows. Gabe's like, I love that canvas. And Johnny's like, yeah, but it stained all of our gear. So how good was it? And then, you know, Kelly makes a good point about the fact that there was a ring skirt and maybe turnbuckles, maybe not, which is something that, yeah, like I hadn't even considered that, because the overall setup, the way that everything was presented looked very good. You wouldn't have known there was an issue getting the ring there because it was set up to look so nice. I feel like there was a story about during the Evolve of like 3 or 4 years ago of Gabe carrying trash bags of Evolve turnbuckles and whipping those into his car and then going with Chris Dickinson to the shows. I feel like that was a story that was out there. So maybe Gabe has the canvas and the turnbuckles with him at all times, which quite honestly, not a bad idea, because who's the one person that's guaranteed to be at the shows? It's Gabe Sapolsky. So perhaps he was taking those with him and then the ring was a separate entity all to itself.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Do you think we could buy the turnbuckles from Gabe? Like a turnbuckle pad or two? Because he has to still have them unless they're like in a storage unit he hasn't paid for.
I know Sal has the Freedom Gate title, so there has to be turnbuckle pads laying around. And there's no way Gabe wants those, so he should send them to us.
Yeah.
Because I would proudly display one.
I mean, I will be 20% more nice to Gabe Sapolsky if I can somehow buy a DGUSA turnbuckle pad for a reasonable price. If it's an unreasonable price, then I'm going to continue me being an asshole. But if we're able to like do some business here, I mean, they're just sitting around, Gabe. Like, do you really think DGUSA is going to pop up again? Come on. Like, the belt, I know the belt, that's Sal, there's no way, and I'm not a belt guy. But a turnbuckle pad, I think that would look pretty nice, and like with my collection of masks and like DG action figures and all the things I have, I'd be really down on getting a DGUSA turnbuckle pad.
Gabe should just offer the same rate that he pays most of his wrestlers. I think that'd be a fair deal.
So,
I think the price just went up.
yeah, so much for that good deal I was hoping for.
My bad. We're all going through stuff now, Mike. That's my bad. I blew that operation for you.
It's all good. It's all good. So this was like the big thing that was happening. It was covered in the newspapers and the dirt sheets. But the bigger thing that happened was that this was the final show for Bryan Danielson for what we called on his first episode of things, his super senior year on the Indies. He would finish this up with a fight with Jon Moxley. And how was kind of the scene around the venue that day, Kelly, knowing that like this was like an era finality was here, because he was already back in WWE, and I think we forgot to mention it on the last show, he at this time was WWE US champion. Like, was there like an interesting kind of like, just, I don't even want to say like an air about it, but like, was there like a sense going in that everyone knew that this was like the final goodbye at this kind of stage?
Yeah, it felt important for sure. Like, it was, because at first you see him, he showed up on, what was it, Survivor Series or something like that? It was some kind of elimination match he was involved in WWE.
That was SummerSlam.
SummerSlam, that's it. Yeah, he popped up in there, and once that happened, I was kind of like, well, guess he's not going to be at that Dragon Gate show anymore. Oh well. And then Gabe puts out the newswire or whatever, and it's like, hey, they're letting him fulfill his dates. He'll be there. It's like, oh, fucking cool. And then he won the title. I was like, what? All right, cool. I get to see the U.S. champion in this little venue wrestling with Dragon Gate guys. This is great. But yeah, no, it was like, it felt important. Like, this was definitely a moment where I was like, oh, this is probably the last chance we'll ever have to see a guy, just to see Bryan in this environment.
Yeah, and at least like through the time, like, it just felt like, oh wow, this is something that was happening and something that felt special. And I feel like that, especially with like these three matches he had in this, like the one versus Shingo, the one versus Yamato, and then finally, I really even wouldn't call it passing baton, but having this kind of match with Jon Moxley and having like in a venue, like, I know that the Miramar Theater was smaller than other venues, but it was one of the cooler venues I feel like that they've run so far. Like, I feel like that there was like an extra like sprinkle on top of how special of a Sunday this was.
Yeah, the Miramar is a great venue, and I've seen 3 wrestling shows there, but like, I don't think anyone ever runs it anymore. The last show I saw was Chikara in 2012, I believe. I don't know if it's just like a pain to get rings in there or whatever, but like, it's such a great wrestling venue.
It's something that like I noticed that whatever ring that was brought to it, it was a smaller ring than I feel like that we've seen like in Chicago and in Philadelphia. So I could totally buy that. Like, people don't want to bother with like a smaller ring, and then I know it's the case of some places could change ownership, and the owners could say, we don't want wrestling here, because I mean, wrestling can fuck up the floors. I mean, like, with all the stuff going on there. But I thought this looked really cool, and I thought like the way it was laid out in a way that, you know, with how Evolve went and how like attendance was for a long time of Evolve, it felt like a perfect Evolve venue, and it felt like for like this kind of show, like something like really special and very intimate that we haven't seen too much of DGUSA so far.
Yeah, intimate is the perfect way to put it. It was just a really nice, it was it looks cool. Like, you get the stage up there, so there's some fans up there, and then you have it was pretty much packed, and it had really good acoustics, so the crowd sounded great. And I mean, it helped that we were literally being hot from standing outside, and everyone was fired up for a good show. But yeah, no, it's an awesome venue for wrestling, and I really wish someone else would run there.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things like with that, with Danielson, with getting a true Dragon Gate 6-man as a main event, it kind of put together what I felt like was a pretty special show. A case where there are any other big notes that I think I've left off before getting into the show itself?
We covered 99% of the timeline on the Untouchable 2010 episode just because we knew we would have a guest on for this week. The thing that should be noted is that on September 9th in the DGUSA Newswire, it was announced that Jigsaw versus Gran Akuma would be on this Milwaukee show as the final chapter of the Chikara Sekigun versus Kamikaze USA feud. That match had to be pulled due to Jigsaw's injury. That happened a week or two before the show, so it was announced ahead of time that it would be Ricochet versus Gran Akuma. The other note is that it was originally planned for Mike Quackenbush to wrestle Dragon Kid in a singles match, but over the course of the broadcast, Lenny Leonard noted that Quackenbush was dealing with an unspecified injury, and thus he ended up entering in the six-way freestyle match, and Eric Cannon got the biggest opportunity of his young DGUSA career as he ended up wrestling Dragon Kid in a singles match, and that is all of the timeline notes I have.
Yeah, and to be honest, like the whole situation with Quack, I think like that three-way match he had with BB Hulk and Tozawa at Untouchable 2010, it did look like there was a moment at the very beginning of the match where he like tweaked something or he went down hard. So I totally understand like the idea of switching that around. And you know, for someone like Eric Cannon, I mean, this was like the start of something more for him in DGUSA. So I thought that was a pretty thing. As tough as I am on Quackenbush, and like this thing has not been very complimentary to my memory, Mike Quackenbush, him versus Dragon Kid would have been an interesting match.
Yeah, that would have been really cool looking back.
So
It would have been interesting to see Quackenbush in that environment because he didn't have I don't know if he had any singles matches against Dragon Gate guys, now that I think about it, because I think all of his work was either the Chikara match on the first show or it was tag team matches with Jigsaw. And this is something we'll touch on a little bit on the next double shot that we talk about the Northeast shows to conclude 2010, but I think we'll talk about it more as we enter 2011, that this six-way freestyle is Mike Quackenbush's final match in Dragon Gate USA. He does not return after this. So we are left with a lot of questions and few answers as to what a prolonged Quackenbush and DGUSA run would have looked like.
you see, I completely forgot that this was his last appearance. So thanks for bringing that up. That's something I'm
Of course.
gonna need to seek out and see if I can find out some things about that. But I think with that, it's worth getting into the show. As we've mentioned, this is from the Miramar Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There was only one Golden Circle match that you got in early for, Kelly. And I'm sorry, there was only one match and not a whole lot more. It was...
And it wasn't special because they let everyone in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they were just like, you guys have been waiting long enough, everyone come in.
That's, I mean, you're not getting Thundersticks there. You would get the voucher for the merch booth, but what else is it supposed to be if you're not going to be there to see the bonus card?
Yeah.
Wait,
there was a voucher? We didn't get a voucher.
I mean, when I went to the Mania shows in Miami, I got a voucher for it was like $10 off at the booth, so I went and I got a bunch of buttons. So
nice. Yeah, no, we got the fancy tickets, which I'll get to again later at the end of the show. But yeah, so we got the Golden Circle match, which was just a dark match.
No, sir. It was a bonus card offering. I assure you, it was just with four guys that Gabe consistently either used on undercards or in dark matches exclusively.
Yeah. Now, did you guys see this?
I did not.
I did not.
Okay.
No. I've seen this match before, though.
Yes,
I
many
watched
times.
the DVD and like, it's fine. Like it's whatever for dark match, but like I'm thinking of a dark match ending with a Shooting Star 450.
I'm wrapping my head around that.
Kind of insane.
And the match was Aeroform defeating Zero Gravity. So the team of Aeroform of Flip Kendrick and Lewis Linden against Zero Gravity of Brett Gakia and CJ Esparza, a usual and often seen Midwest tag team match. I still have a ton of Lewis Linden stock, and I only recently sold my CJ Esparza stock. I don't think that is ever going to happen. But these guys were all over the early Evolve shows. These guys were all over AAW before AAW sort of transitioned its business model. Lewis Linden is the last guy that to me has been worth watching at AIW, even though it's been a few years since I think even that has happened. But it's a 5-minute match between two teams that wrestled each other a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like that this match probably has happened on WWN shows all throughout. Like, this was kind of almost a traveling match in a lot of ways. But, you know, given how things had to switch around with this show, especially in the lead up to, not super surprised, but all things considered, you know, those are 4 kind of Midwest stalwarts. I know that I saw a bunch of Kendrick and Lyndon and Chikara, like, because they had, like, the Cleveland car for a while was them and Gargano. So, like, they worked like a King of Trios like this. And I think I've seen Zero Gravity on what was it? I think it was on a couple of Ian shows. So, I don't...
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't feel like that missing this 5-minute version of that would have been too much. So, that was the one bonus card match. We then opened the show with CIMA getting in the ring. He apologized for the delay and promises a good show. Mentions that Ricochet joined Warriors International to a pretty solid reaction. And mentioned Chuck Taylor might join as well, and the crowd booed. Which, you know, CIMA was all over these cards. And, you know, this was having him out there giving like the, hey, we know this all sucked. And like, and then doing the ooh to all 4 sides was, you know, for CIMA, that's him trying to do a make good. And, you know, I feel like that all things considered in this circumstance is good for CIMA.
I wonder if they shifted things around to make this the opening of the show so CIMA could go out and do this.
I would have to expect so, because I don't think that, like, really, like, looking at the other singles matches, you weren't going to have Gargano and Younger, because Gargano Younger probably would have been the opener, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. So that led to CIMA versus Chuck Taylor. CIMA defeated Chuck Taylor in 11 minutes and 8 seconds. And what I thought was a pretty fun opener. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I thought it was a really fun opener. You had a little bit of comedy in there, which worked. They were doing fun stuff, like with the CIMA biting Chuck Taylor's foot. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And kind of, I haven't watched old Chuck Taylor in quite a while. And it's kind of like, you can tell a little bit he's almost there, but he's improved so much over this, I guess, decade now.
Yeah, and at least, like, for me, like, CIMA very much is someone that's going to, like, take a show off, and especially, like, back-to-back after having a huge match that was on the pay-per-view main event the night before. You know, knowing that Chuck Taylor is someone, even before really, like, I thought, like I was following him, actively at the time, and going back and watch it, like, he is someone that, like, you can tell that this is 10 years previous, but I mean, going with, like, these two guys and going with, like, kind of a little bit of a jokey opener that then kicked into, like, a Final Gear where things got super serious made a lot of sense, and it was like, I felt like a pretty smart way of opening up the show.
I really enjoyed this once they kicked it into gear and began having a somewhat serious contest, mainly because these are two guys who I adore. And CIMA has proven that he can work on the biggest platforms possible and that he can succeed. I truly believe Chuck Taylor has that talent as well. The way he's presented might lessen the impact of a big-time Chuck E.T. run, but I believe, you know, pound for pound, he has that talent. But watching these guys work in a small, intimate setting like this, they are both masters of working to 200 to 400 people. And that sounds like an insult, but it is not. They are just very good at reacting to the crowd and off of the crowd and interacting with the crowd. I thought both of these guys were very much in their element here. And also, to me, this was just an example of what could be on AEW Dynamite, not only because both guys are signed, but this was just a work rate opener to me that if I'm booking a company, I want a match like this starting every one of my shows. Thoroughly enjoyed this opener.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say, like, one thing that I thought was pretty remarkable for someone like CIMA is he has a tendency of being willing to eat someone up, and it did not really feel that way, especially considering the things that Chuck Taylor has said in the past about how he didn't think that CIMA really cared for him. He was able to, like, I mean, get a kick out of a Schwein, and a kick out that I feel like they did a great job getting the crowd to buy into, because at that time, Schwein was pretty much his primary finisher. The Meteora really started to take over this point, but it had enough buy-in there, and I felt like that kind of came together, that this really could be like a Dynamite opener, and it would be something that if this was an opener every week of the year, of course I wouldn't complain, but I think it'd be one of those things that I think the crowd would really get into as well.
Yeah, it was definitely like, it felt like a 50-50 match.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I find remarkable, because there are times, and there's been matches where we've reviewed so far where it has not been 50-50. It's been the CIMA show, and this was not the case there. And I think that was the I would not want to have a CIMA show match open up, considering all the things that happened. Like, this was already an hour and a half late, and then you have CIMA basically eating someone up. Nah, that this was the right move here, and I don't know if it's saying that, like, Gabe pulled CIMA inside and said, hey, I know. You don't need to stress out about this. Let's have something good out there. Or if CIMA was like, all right, I want to have a fun match. And it turned out, and for someone like Chuck Taylor, who was like not really featured up until this point, this was like his big first step here before like how things would end out the year. And I feel like that this was a big first step for him. I feel like that in that situation, I think Chuck Taylor knocked it out of the park.
I was watching very closely for any sort of signs of CIMA disrespecting Chuck Taylor or even just being apathetic towards him, because as Chuck has talked about, like, those two in particular ended up not having a great relationship as their relationship progressed. But like Mike mentioned, Chuck kicked out of the Schwein, which got a great reaction. Gargano did the same thing at the Enter the Dragon pay-per-view. The only time in this match where I felt like CIMA asserted himself, not even in a negative way, but you just clearly felt CIMA's presence, was he does that hang time double stomp in the corner where he kind of handstands on the top turnbuckle and then just drops his feet down onto the abdomen of Chuck Taylor. And it looked like he stuck the landing on that in a way that looked super unpleasant. And maybe that was CIMA's way of, just reminding Chuck Taylor that he is the top dog and that, if you're going to succeed in this company, you need to bring it against me. But Chuck held his own here. I gave the opener 3.5 stars. I loved it.
I went 3.25, but I think that's a pretty fair rating. Kelly, I don't know. Did you watch these shows and had star ratings in your mind when you were watching it?
Yeah, I went 3.25 on this one.
All right, so we're pretty much on the same page there. And something also that happened right after this match that I felt like was very much like Gabe knowing what happened and knowing like I can't just make this like a usual long Gabe show, is he did the thing where I've noticed where if you can tell that Gabe is on some time crunch, or if he has this idea, he likes going from match to match to match and have like segments roll into it. And we had that with Gargano coming out there, giving pops to Chuck, but really just kind of shoving him down because he wanted to talk to CIMA, continuing their storyline. And he tried to convince CIMA that he was growing. CIMA does not take him seriously, and then that leads Drake Younger to attack him, following up on stuff from the first few shows. So that went straight into the next match of Johnny Gargano and Drake Younger. Kelly, what was your opinion of like Johnny Gargano when like in 2010 we saw him live, and like as a young Johnny Gargano finally kind of getting his breakout performances?
That he was a guy where because like my parents weren't as in tune to the indie scene as I was, and I kind of told them like, hey, this is a guy you're gonna want to keep an eye on. Like he definitely felt like he was going to be something special, and like I really enjoyed the promo with CIMA. Like I still laughed out loud when he kept trying to convince CIMA like, no, look at me, not the fans, not the camera, me. But yeah, no, he definitely came off like he's a future star for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that it's kind of remarkable, like looking at this, at least in my opinion, like how much chemistry, considering you have a guy who I don't think Gargano knows any Japanese, and for CIMA, it might have been at that time, his third or fourth language was English. So the fact that they had like pretty good chemistry here, I thought was pretty remarkable for the stage of at least their relationship in DGUSA.
I would co-sign that.
Okay, and then that led to that match. It was Johnny Gargano defeating Drake Younger in 9:59 with the Hertz Donut, and there was an interesting note in the Observer from this thing where they're talking about chair shots, and there wasn't one here, but I know that was kind of a big kind of topic of the time about like the chair shots, and kind of this match also really like brought up like how Drake was not someone who fit in very cleanly in DGUSA, and they said that there was heat on Drake for taking a chair shot to the head thing. It makes like the company does not care about talent. And then Gabe said that the finish where they did do chair shots to the back were used instead didn't get over his audience. So he noted you can't do them to the head, but takes the chair out as an effective tool. So it does seem at this time that they at least recognize that Drake Younger is kind of a sore thumb here. And I feel like that was kind of the tendency for this match as well. I don't know if that was just me, my opinion on that, but did y'all feel that way with Drake in this?
Yeah, he didn't fit in on this show. Like, I don't really have any problem with Drake, but it was just like you're a deathmatch guy. What do you do? You're a CZW guy. What are you doing on Dragon Gates?
It's that, and I'm someone that I have talked about this since Drake started appearing on the show. Like, I really like Drake's PWG work that would come a few years later, or at least I did at the time. I don't know how it holds up now. Not only is Drake a deathmatch guy who doesn't really have a style that I think, at least at this point in his career, meshed well with a Gargano or a Chuck Taylor or a Rich Swann or the guys that he was sort of battling against, there's also just an aesthetic level of Dragon Gate that needs to be met, and that comes in both fitness and just your overall persona. There's kind of a look that needs to be maintained, and Drake Younger on these shows, quite honestly, looks like shit. Like, he's not in shape at this point. Drake would go on to get super ripped, and had 2012 or 2013 Drake shown up, maybe he would have had a shot. But here, Drake looks big. He looks slow. He doesn't fit the vibe or the tone of the promotion. And I never really enjoyed any of the matches he was in. So it's an unfortunate period of Drake Younger's career that I was just not into at all.
Yeah.
Did you guys?
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Kelly. No, go right
Did you
ahead.
guys notice the bit where I'm pretty sure Johnny Gargano forgot how to do a Boston Crab? Where like he's got him up, but he's just holding Drake's feet instead of his like knees or whatever. And like Lenny Leonard even kind of notes on commentary, he's like, he's got him in a modified Boston Crab, and then he switches around. He's like, all right, now he's got it locked in. It was very strange.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that these two guys had a lot of chemistry, and like that seems to be like a very obvious sign of it. The fact that he like it was really like grabbing him by like the flats of his feet and doing like a lock base on it. It was really weird, and it's the only time I can remember anyone trying to do that for Boston Crab. It was insane. But like it's just like this match, at least for me, I felt like that you could see like that the chemistry wasn't there. Gargano, like we're still at the point where like they know they have something with him, but there's still things to work out. I don't like his finish. I don't like the Hurts Donut that much as a finish. It does not look
I don't like it.
It does not look very strong. And of course, like soon he'd have like the Gargano escape, and he would be doing more things based off that. It just was one of those things in this match that I mean, it just like other than like I guess this gives Johnny a feud right now, and Drake is beloved by people in the back, so he's definitely someone that if you have in the locker room, you know that he's a solid guy. It just did not fit in here, and on a show that in retro, like watching this show back, there was like a lot of matches on the show. I was like, you know what, this match is a lot better than I expected. This match could have gone one way or another, but this match was something special. This was like a match that frankly underwhelmed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about his finisher, like even thinking back to just this show, it seems like they almost didn't respect it, because in the second match on the card, you had Drake doing a one kick out of Johnny's finishing move.
It's just like I know like Case, you've watched this and you've talked about it. Like Johnny like talks about like how he's like changed and like took himself more seriously. Like it wasn't just like the gimmick thing. It was like okay, changing who he was as a wrestler, and it's very clear that like this. I could see a lot of people going backstage to say, "Nah, you need to get a new finish, kid. That looks like crap."
Yeah.
I'm in favor of the Hurts Donut. I don't mind it as much as you guys, but I do think one of the best things Gargano did for his career is implementing a submission finish, because just the way Gargano matches are worked, which for a long time I was drastically in favor of, and over the past year or two I have now drastically turned against because it feels bloated and unnecessary. But Gargano is someone who his style that he brings to various territories has always been kick out heavy, and has been heavy on the dramatics, which again I really liked up until a year or two ago. So him having an established finish like the Hurts Donut that can pin guys but can also be kicked out of, I feel like was greatly aided his career at times, because he also had the Gargano escape, which he would implement later, and that was a very respected and pretty deadly submission move.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, like, he does have moves that even when the Gargano escape comes about, that he will get other near falls off. So, I mean, he loves the lawn dart. I don't know if that move is banned. I've not watched a Johnny Gargano match since I sat myself through what I think was the cage match with him and Adam Cole, where I was like, okay, I'm done with this now. Like, I went back and I was like, all right, this is it for me. But he starts like, because you're absolutely right. Like, he is someone that, like, if you're going to like say what his style is, it's not necessarily even like a ring style. It's an emotion based style and a kick out based style. So it's nice that he's developed that, but it's just one of those things that like I like keeping in mind, like, oh, so this is where he was at. And especially as we get in towards the tail end of 2010 and into 2011, we'll see how drastically things start changing around Johnny Gargano.
Yeah, it ends up improving for the better. So I look forward to seeing what is in store for Gargano.
Case, would you say you got out of the Johnny Gargano stuff when Daddy came home?
Here's my brief history with Gargano. So I think people now either forget or they just don't know, because why would they? Who cares? But towards like the end of Dragon Gate USA, when I started watching the company in 2013 and up through the Revival DIY tag matches that drastically changed the narrative on Gargano, it was unpopular in most circles to enjoy Gargano. Now, most of those people are the same people that were anti-Prince Devitt in New Japan, were anti-Pac, were behind the times on Kevin Steen and Sami Zayn. They dragged their feet in the mud and they lashed themselves onto a Tim Thatcher type or a Drew Gulak type, or just these wrestlers that, are fine at times, but ultimately bore me. NXT as a whole lost me 2 Mania weekends ago. So what was that? New York? When did there was a Gargano Ciampa match or maybe it was Gargano Cole, whatever one happened at WrestleMania, obviously not this year, but the year before. It was so bloated and over the top and just not what I enjoyed, that was when I threw up my hands on not only Gargano, but the entire promotion. So a legitimate answer to a funny question you asked me.
Oh, no, for
and
me,
going
it was
back to like what you said with people not liking Gargano, let me show you how wrong those people were back in 2014, 2015. Brandon Stroud really hated Johnny Gargano. So I think that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, that changes my full thing on him. Exactly. Yeah. I would say about Daddy Eats First is the thing that turned me off, though. However, the Mommy Eats First with Candice Del Rey, on the other hand, I find incredibly amusing, and I like the idea of... Have you seen those backstage promos that they've been doing?
They're so weird.
They're so weird, Case. It's worth watching their dinner thing that they have. It's just...
I saw screenshots of that. I did not check it out, but if it gets the Mike Spears seal of approval, I might as well watch it.
Well, if I'm going to recommend something, it's either because it's legitimately good or just amuses me.
And there's no in between.
No, because if I'm not going to recommend it, it means it doesn't amuse me. It's just bizarre, like, camera effects, and then they have, like, the steel cup that he wore in that match on the middle of their dining room table.
Ugh, okay. God, I hate this already, but I'll watch it. I'll watch it for Mike.
I hope they eventually use the cup as like a gravy boat or something.
Oh, they have to. They absolutely have to. Like, use it as like a gravy boat, or like, because like the dinners that they have is very much like you're using those Instagrammable meals that people get, and it's just like, imagine like whatever sauce they have, like the very like small pesto, they include this packet, so they just slowly pour over from the crotch area or the ball region of the cup. Like, there's a lot of ways you can go with this, Kelly. I think this has some legs.
I think it's absolutely what they need.
Yeah. So I went 2 3/4 on this match just because, like, I did like the idea that Drake came in as a house of fire, but as soon as the match kind of settled down, I was like, oh, this isn't working. But I mean, for Johnny, I feel like this is like a thing that was like a step along the way. It's just Drake doesn't work in DGUSA, sadly.
Yeah, I gave it the same rating.
Yeah, I went 2.5 on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I it just does not work. It's just one of those things that I feel bad for Drake because of like how good he got that we didn't get that Drake like 2 years later there, but just not here, at least right at this moment. That led us to a backstage promo where finally one of the biggest loose ends of the last 2 shows gets cleared up as Bryan Danielson and Hulk are backstage. Or back outside. I wonder if they shot all of these. Like, they're like, let's just get these all done since we're running late. Let's get these promos done because Daniel's...
Yeah, I think they were just behind the venue because it just judging on like the light and stuff. It was definitely while we were waiting out there.
I mean, knowing how Gabe has gotten on people in the past about what they're doing in the time before a show, this at least was productive. I mean, however, I would rather play basketball with Chris Hero than cut weird, awkward promos. So, you take the good and the bad with that. So Danielson and Hulk are outside. Danielson says that Moxie has zero respect and that they're going to not wrestle, they're going to fight. He then thanks Hulk and says, I'm sorry that I've not really been able to be around and help out as a member of World 1. However, I have someone in mind and someone to give you a call that definitely will pick up the banner for me. So we finally have the loose end tied up about BB Hulk and Bryan Danielson, and we have who might be a new member of World 1 coming forward in the next set of shows.
Yes, intrigue ensues.
I forgot this promo happened, and so when I going back and watching this show, because I know I definitely watched the show because I watched everything with Tozawa other than the Canadian shows, I was like, oh, okay, that's nice that at least they recognize how weird of a situation it was that Bryan Danielson joined World 1 on his first night, and then basically 2 shows later, he's like, I'm out of here, so I got someone for you. So I thought that was a pretty effective way of getting out of that pickle that they put themselves into.
I would agree.
And that led to the first ever, at least on pay-per-view, 6-way freestyle as Rich Swann faced off against Kyle O'Reilly, the aforementioned Mike Quackenbush, Silas Young, Brody Lee, and Jimmy Jacobs. Brody Lee got the win in 11 minutes and 22 seconds. We got a big boot on Rich Swann, and boy, this is a bunch of guys to be in this match. Like at different.
It's a stacked lineup.
It's like wild because Silas is from Wisconsin, he is from Green Bay, right?
Yeah, he's Milwaukee.
So local guy there, and this is before he was with Ring of Honor. Kyle O'Reilly making an appearance after Davey left, so that's something. And then you have Swann, who's been featured mainly with Brody Lee, Quackenbush, getting put into this because of injury, and Jimmy Jacobs. What a wild lineup here.
So I looked at a few different things in this match. One, I wanted to see how Silas Young, who had been working all of the bonus cards in Chicago, I wanted to see how he would fit in against some bigger talent. I mean, Jimmy Jacobs and Mike Quackenbush are stars on the indies at this point, and Rich Swann and Kyle O'Reilly and Brody Lee are up-and-comers. And Silas at this point, he actually worked Ring of Honor in 2009 as like an HDNet jobber, but had, I think, 4 or 5 months in the company where he was maybe not featured on shows, but was consistently working shows, and then that didn't work out. And this is still 2 or 3 years before the last real man gimmick comes into play. So it looks like the Silas Young we know, but the mannerisms aren't there, and he feels just like another indie guy. And his performance here wasn't bad, but it didn't necessarily blow me away. Whereas Brody Lee, who we've talked about since the Canada shows when he made his presence felt, there has not been a single second that Brody Lee has been on camera in this promotion thus far that I have not enjoyed. And I thought he was phenomenal in this match. I think Rich Swann, who was only 19 at the time, Swann looked good. Jimmy Jacobs does well in matches like this. He's oftentimes the glue. But Brody Lee, with his killer truck stop and his giant big boot, and he is the rightful victor of this match. To me, this was an even bigger coming out party for Brody Lee, because now every time he's on the show, he is stealing that segment and has been masterful in his performance.
That big boot to Swann to finish the match, that was a murder right there. Like, he killed that guy.
And it's, seconds after this truck stop that he hits on O'Reilly. And, O'Reilly at this point is a young guy. He hadn't really filled out the way that he eventually would. And O'Reilly's, a shorter guy, but has muscle. And even at this point, was a little stockier, and he gets up for this truck stop, and Brody Lee spins him around and throws him down with no problem whatsoever. And I thought that would end up being the finish. And then instead, the match continues a little while longer. Then, as Kelly points out, Brody just wipes Swann off the face of the earth with this big boot. I loved it.
Yeah, like the thing about this match that I really took away from it was Kyle O'Reilly is not someone you think would be fitting in necessarily when you have the remainder of the people here, and especially with how DGUSA is and how he was in his career. I thought it was very beyond his years and experience, the way he kind of took his style, because that's something I find really remarkable. He's improved on certain things, but Kyle O'Reilly's kind of been the same kind of wrestler his entire career, but he made it work in a really awesome way in this match. And I thought that was something that made it kind of special when you have like him in this match. Silas Young, who, you know, he was so much bigger than everyone else in Brody Lee, but he was still willing to fly around. Quackenbush doing like weird submissions I've never seen before. And then Kyle O'Reilly's just coming in there throwing bombs. And I thought it all worked out really well in this match.
Yeah, I went 3 1/4 on this. It was just for the time it was given and the placement on the card, I didn't feel like I could go any higher. But ultimately, the match felt really efficient and spotlighting Swan to an extent, spotlighting Jacobs to an extent, but really putting the focus on Brody Lee and showing that he can be dominant against guys that are pushed commodities in this company.
That was exactly what I had, and I felt like that's a pretty way. Like, I liked how like we had stuff like Jimmy Jacobs went for the end times and Brody Lee just powered himself into a really devastating spine buster. And, you know, I think it's been interesting how much like Rich Swann at this point, they found ways for him like to take the finish. But I felt like other than like Kyle O'Reilly, like kind of molding himself into this match, that this match has kind of become the Rich Swann match so far, at least through the last few shows. And I really enjoyed it, but you're absolutely right about this. I thought 3 1/4, but for what this match was supposed to be, I thought like it was a complete success.
Kelly, what did you give this?
I went 3 1/4 as well. Swan definitely stood out, and especially with him just antagonizing Brody Lee almost the entire match, and which kind of led up perfectly to the finish. But one thing I thought was kind of interesting is looking at both Kyle O'Reilly and Silas Young is how much of their offense is still the same. Like that they still use kind of the same moveset, but I mean they've obviously refined it. But there's a lot of stuff where I was like, oh yeah, they still do that and they still do that. It was funny just watching. It's like, oh yeah, still 10 years ago, but you guys are still doing the same stuff. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always been one of those things that when watching these shows, especially now that we're at a certain point, it was like 11 years before. Now we're already up to 10 years, but 10 years ago, like seeing like, especially like someone like O'Reilly and even Silas Young who have gone on to bigger and better things. Like they already had certain commands of themselves in the ring. And I feel like that's kind of remarkable, seeing like, okay, Gabe's known for like being someone who's able to figure out someone and give him the avenue to perform. And even though like Silas Young, I feel like I know he did more Evolve at this time than he did DGUSA, but it did feel like that Gabe had a certain level thing where a lot of people who don't make sense on these shows get worked out pretty quickly. But Silas Young still had a place, it felt like, for a while after this.
And Silas is one of the few like hometown guys that I'd like actually kind of take pride in, because it's like I saw him on so many shows just working like openers or dark matches, and you know now he's in a Ring of Honor. It's like, oh dude, he made it. That's awesome.
And it's something that like it's interesting, like when we, like talking about DGUSA, because he does find these like local people, some of them that for some inexplicable reason become the most over thing on the show. Hello, all you lovely Toronto wrestlers. And then you have someone like Silas Young who's just like plugs himself in. I mean, from this, like Silas Young has a pretty much a run with DGUSA up until the next show in Milwaukee. So it works out, and it's kind of cool. I like the idea of like the local hometown guy that I would imagine at this point, Kelly, you've probably seen more Silas Young not on TV than anyone's seen him on TV. So that's kind of cool they did.
Seen him a ton of times, and like it's always kind of fun now in Ring of Honor where they'll just be like, oh well, we kind of put him in the main event.
And he's always fine in the main event. Like Silas Young here, like I would have been interesting. Like obviously it seems like Ring of Honor, given how DGSA went, was the right move. But imagining like Silas Young somehow joining like Blood Warriors and going over to Japan for Dragon Gate would have been something real interesting, because he's just such a distinct person and he had such a really distinct offense. I could see the Japanese crowd responding in an interesting way too. Case, what would you think about Silas Young and Dragon Gate?
Well, you know, I like Silas Young. I've seen him in person a lot in both Ring of Honor, and I've seen him on some AEW shows, at least I believe in person. If not, I've definitely seen him on tape. Silas, it's almost like the Drake Younger thing, where Silas is a good wrestler on his own, but I don't think his style would have acclimated well to the company. Even his PG Waja plunge, moonsault, the headstand, rope bounce, moonsault gimmick he does, that is a good-looking move, but at the same time, I hate that Silas Young does it. It feels so forced in his arsenal of like, oh, this will pop the crowd, but especially like during his last real man days, it would be like, why? I don't understand why you're doing this. This goes against everything else you're doing. And, on a show with Ricochet, the PG Waja plunge moonsault feels quite lesser than a 630 dive that Ricochet would do, or the double moonsault that he had in his back pocket. So I don't see any reasonable roadmap to Silas Young being a Dragon Gate stable member at any point. And it two up until now, as we're recording this, maybe something happens. Maybe the world changes and Silas Young becomes a Dragon Gate roster member within the time this is recorded, and then it comes out. But I don't see that happening.
From what I was told when he did the Ring of Honor tour of New Japan, like, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago? I guess the backstage guys were really interested to see if he could do the headstand moonsault on their turnbuckle pads, where it's the full bar instead of the individual ones. And I guess Gato was like, came up to him after the match, was like, "Oh, you were able to do it."
Rules.
I find stuff like that remarkable, like what goes on in people's minds. Like, oh, we've seen you do this so long. Try it in our ring with these pads. Because, I can see like how it completely would mess up your equilibrium or your balance on that. So, good. I'm glad that Gato appreciated that, like the level of difficulty, like if we were doing like gymnastics, scoring that, like that the Pijuana plunge would have been with the full pad.
For sure. And then, Mike, do you want to transition to the John Moxley promo from there? Because I thought this was a banger of a promo.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, this was something that, a big topic has been how is John Moxley in 2020 eyes when we watch how he was in 2009, 2010. And at this point, this might be one of my favorite promos in his company. He is backstage. He's out back before the show, before the ring. Sadly, he did not have a cigarette in his hand, because I feel like that would have made this like even better if he was like taking drags of a cigarette. I was saying this. He said he got himself a call from John. What John? John Cena. And he claims that Cena offered him 10 grand to break Bryan Danielson's arm, and he said he would do it for free. And then he says the only lights that you will see after this aren't going to be the lights on the big stage there. The only lights you're going to see are the ones above me. And this was like a 2-minute promo, but I felt like this was perfect.
Him saying that he was offered 10 grand to break somebody's arm, and then he'll do it for free instead, encapsulates the John Moxley character so well. This, I don't know if it's my favorite promo he's done so far, but this was a dynamite promo that it just, we talked about when Moxley was introduced to the company, like it was so clear that Gabe loved this guy and needed him to do something immediately. And we weren't sure how it was going to hold up, but every single Moxley promo, it's like, yeah, like this guy's the man. Of course. Like, of course Gabe loves this dude. He hits a home run every single time he talks.
Yeah, he perfectly walks that line of, oh, he's funny. Oh, no, he's scary. Like, it's so good. Like with the John Cena line, and then just the believability of him. Like, he is this guy. He's this dirtbag, and there's few wrestlers of this era that are as believable as John Moxley.
Yeah, it's just something like watching him, and like even I don't even know how. I'm gonna look up how old he was at this time, because he was really just a guy that was only really starting to break out. 24. John Moxley at 24 had more command of his presence than a lot of people do, like 15 years in their career. And even this, like 6 years into his career, he already knew exactly who he was, and it was remarkable. But that was, I think, the last. Oh no, there's a couple more backstage stuff, but that was leading into one of the matches that was changed up, as Eric Cannon had his first big singles match in DGUSA as he faced off against Dragon Kid, and Dragon Kid defeated him in 9 minutes and 43 seconds with a Bible, in a match that, if anyone was going to be kind of constrained with like how things are in the Miramar Theater, I feel like that Dragon Kid would have been. But I feel like the two of them kind of came together. It wasn't like a perfect match, but I thought this match was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was definitely a Fire Pro match. Like this was just, all right, random Dragon Kid, all right, random again, Eric Cannon, all right, go. Like this, you would never have thought that you'd ever see this match, and it was a fun clash of styles. And like Eric Cannon is kind of underappreciated. Like, he's not amazing, but he's a fantastic utility player. And like, if I was making a roster, I'd probably pick him up as a guy who's like your solid mid-card hand.
Yeah, I was like really high on Cannon, and like he did some tours of Dragon Gate because of WSX, and then he was someone that like really for him, I mean, with how the indies were, he was getting a lot of different places, and it's just like him being here, and then he's kind of, I guess, really just works his indie that he runs in Minneapolis, but he's such like a believable character. He's a guy that for his size, I don't think he had this match, but I've been real interested if there was like an Eric Cannon versus Shingo Takagi match, because that would be a really interesting one. And him and Dragon Kid, I felt like that, it wasn't completely flush, but whenever I see Eric Cannon on these shows, I get a little excited because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how awesome you were in Chikara and on like some IWA Deep South or IWA Mid South shows. So I'm always happy to see him on these shows.
I'll keep my thoughts on these next two matches pretty brief because I don't have a ton to say. Cannon is always someone I've struggled with. I really respect him. I think there's talent there that is maybe not executed at times, if that makes sense. Like, I always expect Eric Cannon matches to be a little bit better than they are. I will say I enjoyed this because it was a guy for Dragon Kid to climb on and around, much like the Shingo Takagi match from the night before. Inoffensive, fine. There's nothing else I have to say about this, although this is kind of the start of Cannon as a pushed commodity in the company for the next 2 or 3 years. So this is his jumping off point.
Yeah, and he's someone that's not like one of those top 4 people that we talk about, but he's someone that there is stuff that they have with Cannon throughout the company. And I think that with the injury of Quackenbush and him stepping up, this probably was an avenue for him further. I give this one the gentleman's 3. I thought this was perfectly decent, and especially given what all happened to make this match change happen, I felt like it was exactly what it should be.
Gentleman's 3 from me as well.
Same. I want gentleman's 3 as well.
Somehow, I usually either talk to Case a lot about these shows ahead of time or not, and somehow we're basically on the same thought process, all 3 of us, and that's a little scary to me.
Feels good. Feels good to have my thoughts validated. This is a big confidence boost for me, this podcast.
Accurate star raters.
Exactly.
We are accurate star raters on the show, and I'll be interested to hear what you all have to say about this one. This is another match where, it was there in my opinion. It was Gran Akuma versus Ricochet. Ricochet defeated Gran Akuma in 7 minutes and 23 seconds, the shortest match on the main show, with the double moonsault. And, this, after the performance that Ricochet had the night before, especially going against Speed Muscle, this was a lot more of like the raw Ricochet that you could tell like he had a lot of stuff to improve upon.
Yes. So we talked in the last episode, the night before, Ricochet teams with Shima. They wrestle Speed Muscle. I think it's one of the best matches in the promotion's history. And Ricochet is made as a star, and the way it's presented, that is the beginning of what would later become a King of Gate winner, an Open the Dream Gate winner, a Battle of Los Angeles winner, an NXT superstar, and a main roster fodder, but that's not his fault. The thing with this match is that it went 7 minutes, and it sounds weird to say that this should have gone shorter, especially given that Akuma's initial positioning on the card was, yes, he was going to end up losing to Jigsaw, but he and Jigsaw were going to have what I would think to be a pretty heated match. I mean, it's a feud that had been going for over a year at that point. So I don't want to say that Akuma should have just been squashed and that he should have been tossed aside, but I didn't like seeing Ricochet struggle with Akuma to this extent, given that we had just watched the prior show where Ricochet comes away looking like $1 million. I kind of wish this was a 3 or 4 minute, Akuma cuts him off once and then Ricochet just hits move after move and is done with him. Fine for what it was, not a match I'll go back on at any point. I went 2 1/4 with this.
Yeah, it felt really sloppy to me. Like, this was definitely Ricochet's putting together the pieces, but he's still pretty raw at this point. And yeah, it didn't do much for me. The finish was awesome because he just crushed Akuma, just landed right on his ribs. Like
that was heavy.
Like it hurt so bad.
I have to imagine, like, that is a move that you really are hoping that someone's going to roll kind of off you when you do this. No, Ricochet just went however much he waited this time straight down on Akuma's stomach, and that just had to suck. And I have to imagine that, like, was this your first time seeing Ricochet live, Kelly?
Yes.
How was seeing, like, the double moonsault live? Like, I have to imagine, like, the first time I saw it live was like, this breaks physics. This makes no sense.
Yeah, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like, how does that work?
It's just one of those things that, like, to this day, like, even like one spot out before we move on this match I thought was ridiculous was with how cramped everything was on this show. Ricochet decided to do a Sasuke special on this match. And this match, insane person, like especially like 2009 before or 2010 before he like wisens up and was like, I'm going to kill myself if I keep on doing this. Doing this is insane to me.
Yeah, and before I move on from this match, I do have to shout out my friend Peter. You see him in the crowd. He's the guy who, when Ricochet is going around giving high fives, he pulls his hand away from him.
Oh,
So
A man ahead of his time.
yeah,
He saw
so-
what was coming and said, I don't want to be a part of this.
So shout out to Peter. We went to high school together, and I actually saw him today at work.
Good.
hey, especially considering like Ricochet, like the look on his face when his hand got pulled back was something.
he was. It looked like he was legitimately hurt by it.
I mean, Ricochet was like a teenager at that point. That had to be like a little bit like low self moment of, hey, you're supposed to like me. Why don't you like me? But yeah, I went 2.5 on this match, just mainly because I thought what they tried to do and the circumstances, even though with how messy it was, I thought it was kind of remarkable. The fact that maybe it was a 2.5 stars just for that insane Sasuke special where they immediately like fell into like the chasm between the stage and the ring. I was like, that could have been terrible. So
Yeah, that was the craziest part of it, was how it's like they really could have got messed up on that.
it's nuts. Absolutely.
There's a spot with the stage at the show the next year where Tozawa accidentally pushes a fan off of the stage and it almost looked like he killed that guy.
I mean, that's the Zawa. That makes sense
Yeah.
that he would be the kind of person to accidentally do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I went 2 3/4 on it. Purely, I added the extra quarter star just because of Ricochet crushing Akuma at the end.
Just brutal. Just,
Yeah.
might be to this day the heaviest double moonsault he ever does. But that led to, we had other backstage promo as Jimmy Jacobs was talking. They made sure that we know now that this one was happening earlier today. Jimmy talked about how he talks about Moxley. I don't think this was like his strongest promo. He talked about, I didn't take very many notes on it because it kind of was a rote promo, but he made a line about he's okay with having scars all over his body because you can't cause scars on a dead body. And I was like, okay, Jimmy, that's a little dark. Okay. But yeah, no, I don't think this was Jimmy Jacobs' best promo, at least here.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it was, it was there, but Jacobs has had better and will have better in the promotion as we go forward.
It seemed like the promo from a guy who was prepared to run out of the venue at any moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, we got to keep an eye out for this, but cut this promo real fast.
And then suddenly he sprints down the street, never to be seen until the show. I buy it. So after that, we had a promo as Moxley came down to the ring, basically riffing on the "you're gonna get your head kicked in" chant, and then he did probably the one thing that I would say that the most of Moxley in 2020 really holds up. He has the same value before, and like he does this like kind of side effect, but he like slaps her around and just like, oh, Moxley, come on, man, this is even for 2010, like with the weird energy that he was saying, like that. I think that once Delaney called him like weird animal chemistry he has, or like charisma he has, that I thought that was kind of awkward there.
Yeah, he's so gross. Like he's just such a disgusting dirtbag.
It's just something that like, I know that now you can't really turn the clock back with him nowadays, but I'd be real interested if he like just comes out like in whatever hoodie he like drove in the ring with, like takes off his pants, has his tights on, puts out a cigarette and has a match. Like I would completely buy that as something that John Moxley would do. And I'm disappointed we don't have that on national TV, because at least I feel like that'd be very interesting.
I'm disappointed we don't have this match on national TV. And
Yeah.
to think at one point it was well, it was very possible twice, as these guys spent 7 years in the same company together. But then, we've talked a lot about Danielson and how, he had a chance to jump ship or to change wrestling and didn't. And I've mentioned on the show that, even the pimped WWE Daniel Bryan stuff, I just don't enjoy as much as other people do, just because I don't think he works great in that environment. I think it often handicaps him. And seeing this match, which this is the last match that he worked for Gabe, if you're a completist, it should be noted that he ended up working an NEW show the weekend after this, and he wrestled Shelton Benjamin on that show, and that was his final independent date. But this match with Moxley is precisely why I don't enjoy his WWE stuff as much, because there is no way, there is no possible scenario in which he can work a match as violent as this one in that company. And, Chuck Taylor's a guy that we mentioned a few shows ago. Chuck Taylor is like a sneaky good plunder brawler. Like, Chuck Taylor works really well with weapons and succeeds in that environment. Bryan Danielson, does not need weapons to portray danger and violence in the way he does. And when he said this match was going to be a fight, it turned out to be just that. And this is a match that I have seen before. I've seen it, I had the DVD, so I probably watched the show 3-4 times because, when I had DVDs, I was just constantly consuming them. I had not seen this match in years. I was blown away at just how good it was because of the physicality and the intensity and the fact that it didn't overstay its welcome. It was a 14-minute match, and it's a shame that this is the end of Bryan Danielson, because it's a wrestler that I sorely miss.
Yeah, this match is fantastic. I still rank it as one of my favorite matches I've ever seen live. It's so good. And just knowing it's one of Danielson's last matches before he goes off to WWE land was just amazing. And it's like it's such a brawl. Like, you wouldn't expect that out of Bryan Danielson's final indie match. You'd think, okay, it'll be kind of like, I don't know, maybe like a technical masterpiece or something. It's just a brutal, bloody brawl. Like, I love it so much.
It's something where watching this match, it struck me like right in like the first 3 minutes of the match. I don't think we said it was 14 minutes 56 seconds. Danielson won with a little bit of luck, but the first 2 or 3 minutes of it, we got this great all-time House of Fire where he just comes out immediately, like takes it to him, puts him in the elbows, locks on the cow mutilation very early, and it just made me think Bryan Danielson might be one of the all-time, other than being like an all-time great wrestler, he might be one of like the top 5 like all-time House of Fire wrestlers, that when Bryan Danielson like is pissed off and is like revving up, or like he's just trying to like compose himself, psych himself up, you're going to get something incredible here. It's like the first like 3 or 4 minutes, like basically leading up to him getting busted open, which that's wild for him getting himself busted open, considering what all was going on in WWE, and this was when they started their trend into safety. The fact that in his last like high profile indie match, he got himself busted open hard, and it looked like it was like pretty rough on like a turnbuckle, and it just was something remarkable, like this whole entire thing. And it's definitely something where they would later, because I was looking this up while you were talking, they had a grand total of 89 matches in WWE, and other than maybe the initial Shield versus Team Hell No stuff, nothing really kind of peaks to this level of this match. And it's really remarkable that they had this match, and then less than 2 years later they would start having more matches against each other again, and nothing like they would not have. Like, I'm looking at these singles matches that they had, I don't remember a single one of them, and they're all just, and a lot of them made tape and a lot of them made TV, but this is a match I'm like, oh yeah, this was an outright fight, and even though it was not a no DQ match, it felt different than everything else, and that was remarkable.
89.
Yeah, that is shocking to me, because other than the Shield debut, which is the Shield against Brian Kane and Ryback, which I actually think is one of the best matches in WWE history. It is not that top tier. It is not an Edge Orton of greatest matches ever, obviously, but it's not. It's a second tier like of greatness for me. But I think that is one of the most effective and shockingly one of the most violent matches WWE has ever had. There's a lot of spots in that match that feel like they have more weight than a broken barrier spear or an ace crusher off of the ladder. Like they do some stuff there where it's like, oh man, that could have gone really, really wrong. Other than that, and granted, I mean, there's probably stuff towards the end of Ambrose's run there, of Mox's run there, that I wasn't seeing, but I was watching WWE weekly, 2012 through through 2015, because that's a lot of Kevin Owens stuff, and I saw all of that in the John Cena US Open Challenge. So I'm clearly watching the product as these matches are happening, and the fact that only one sticks with me, and that's their debut, that is a failure in execution on behalf of WWE. That is a shame that they wrestled so much and produced so little.
Yeah, I would have wagered that there was that or that TLC match, and then maybe I think there's one follow-up match, but I would have wagered that was it, because I have no recollection of anything else.
So to be fair, that was 89 matches that also include tag matches. They had 5 matches that were just the two of them on TV, and I can't remember anything with them. Yeah, and then another 4 matches on house shows when Ambrose was United States champion. That's all they had, like, singles match-wise during their entire time there. But still, 89 matches and 9 singles matches, and nothing is as good as this.
That's insane. And also, anyone listening to this, if you haven't seen that TLC match in a while, or maybe never saw it, go back and watch it. It's, like Case was saying, it's shockingly great. I mean, you get Moxley or Ambrose at the time just whipping chairs at Ryback.
It's insane.
Yes.
But yeah, it's like and this is just so good. And what you were saying about the House of Fire with Bryan, it reminded me a lot of his matches with Morishima.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like, all right, cool. I'm going to come out here and we're going to beat the shit out of each other. Let's just go for it.
And it's something that, for someone like Moxley, who still, you could tell he later kind of like fully gets stuff here, but he can brawl, and like doing that here was such a smart move, like everything in this match was just a real subversion of expectations, and made this, like, for them building this up to be a fight, this felt out and out like a huge fight, and I loved it for that.
Yeah, and while Bryan won, it felt like a passing of the torch.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. Like, you could tell, like, the former Gabe guy with the current Gabe guy, like, this felt like, okay, Moxley was someone that could have been the guy in Dragon Gate USA coming off of this match.
Yeah.
So I went 4.25 on this match, which might be a little low. Well,
Mike, I went 4.25 as well. We did not talk about this show ahead of time, and I think I went a quarter star higher than you on the opener, and other than that, we are right in line.
I am 4.5 on this one.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair, and I think seeing this live also, like, I had to imagine, like, other than the main event, like, I would have loved to see this match live just because of how, like, I've noticed with something with Moxley that he gets terror over. Like terror and just randomness. Like, I know, like, the whole, like, lunatic fringe thing, like, you get, like, that certain thing there that, like, watching him live that you don't get with anyone else, and I would have loved to, like, been in Wisconsin for this match.
Yeah, like, he feels like that scary dirtbag. Like that's just who he is. That's not a character. That's really him. It not so as much as New Jack, but it's on the same track.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that different kind of lunatic, but I could see that.
Yeah.
One more less weird cage match note before move on. So they've had two matches on pay-per-view. Neither of them were singles matches. One of them was the Royal Rumble. One of them was the ladder match at WrestleMania 31. How can't these guys? I know, like, things were different and, like, positioning wise, you only have like 2 pay-per-view matches between these guys. That's insane. So
wasted opportunities.
Yep.
I mean, story of a lot of people in WWE in recent time. I'm sorry, I do this a lot. Okay, no, they had that TLC match, so 3 matches. My apologies. I don't want people to tweet at me ever, so wanted to make sure for that not to happen. So,
but WWE's treatment of Bryan and Moxley is very much like the promo that followed after this, where Jimmy Jacobs tries to sit in a chair and it just collapses on him.
That was so wild. So Danielson extends his hand, but then Akuma comes out and Moxley attacks him. Jimmy Jacob comes out to save the chair. Bryan Danielson takes the mic. Jimmy breaks his chair, which for someone like Jimmy Jacobs to break a chair, what kind of chair did they have there? And then they did like the full like passing the torch promo there. And they were joking about how Jimmy Jacobs, of course, as you all have listened will know, he was very involved in setting up the ring. Bryan Danielson sat this one out.
And good for Bryan.
Yeah.
He was U.S. champion at the time. He does not need to be setting up a Dragon Gate USA ring.
Did he have the belt with him there, Kelly? Or do you remember if he did?
I don't remember seeing the belt.
I just, you know, with how they are recently, I've been surprised that, I mean, you're on the indies, man. You could charge more for your last photograph. I know Danielson's not necessarily the kind of guy who's all like money, like economy forward, but if I was in a situation, I'd be like, if you want to photograph the belt, that costs double. So that
we'll get to, like, I'll talk about this near the end, but he was doing taking pictures afterwards. He wasn't charging anything.
I mean, that is such a Bryan Danielson thing, you know, in a lot of ways. I mean, whenever I think about his decisions and his career path, it makes me really sad because a lot of things with Bryan Danielson he does, I'm like, hell yeah, you're the guy there. But yeah, so main event time, we had the Dragon Gate 6-man tag came to Milwaukee as Kamikaze USA defeated World 1. The Kamikaze USA team was Akira Tozawa, Shingo Takagi, and Yamato versus the World 1 team of BB Hulk and Masato Yoshino and Naruki Doi, the most over man in Milwaukee, Naruki Doi, as we had the Big Six for the first time on American soil have a match that all these people would stick around as soon as Tozawa would come back and be the focal point of this generation here. Interestingly enough, and in a very smart booking move given what's happening on future shows, Shingo Takagi got the win. So Tozawa, the young guy, the person who's like the bottom ranked person, did not take the fall in this match as he pinned the Open the Freedom Gate champion, BB Hulk, in the stage reign. And what I thought was a truly special match, and a match that, because of like this was a show that was only for DVD, I think this match is worth going out of your way to see if you're someone who really loves that 6-man style. I thought this was incredible.
Yeah,
Kelly, go ahead.
This is a special match. Like, I mean, you get to the end of the match, and I don't know, for the last 3 or so minutes, everyone's on their feet the entire time. It's just, you could tell these guys wanted to go out and make sure we got a great show, and it was amazing. Like, and the pace these guys worked at in what was a pretty hot room. Like, you could see, like, BB Hulk especially was pouring sweat in this match. And it's just nuts. Like, the closing stretch is incredible. I love this match. To this day, one of the best matches I've ever been in person for.
I remember really, really liking this match the first time I saw it. And the first time I would have seen this match would have been very early into my Dragon Gate and Dragon Gate USA watching. So I wasn't sure how it was going to hold up. But knowing that it was the Big Six in this match, this generation of Dragon Gate now being represented on American soil, and to my knowledge, and I could be forgetting a match here or there, but this match happened, I know for sure, on the March 3rd, 2010 Cork and Hall show in Japan, and it featured this incarnation of teams with the World 1, Hulk, Yoshino, Doi, and the Kamikaze, Tozawa, Shingo, Yamato. And then I know the match happened again in 2013. It would have been September 29, 2013, when it was Mad Blanky of Hulk, Doi, and Yamato versus Tozawa, Yoshino, and Shingo. But I mean, this is a match that was big on paper, that felt big in the arena, and there's not necessarily one guy that I think stole the show, because part of what makes the Dragon Gate 6-man in particular so special is almost a sense of unity, that everybody is bringing the same thing to the table. And while Tozawa at this point in his career was clearly positioned as the weakest guy of the 6 people in this match, you have to remember that Tozawa is only a few weeks removed from his career-changing match against Chris Hero at PWG's Battle of Los Angeles, and the confidence that Tozawa has in this match compared to what we saw at the 1-year anniversary show, compared to what we saw at the Canada double shot. Like, this is an entirely different Akira Tozawa, who was working as someone who has figured out his craft and is on a path to greatness. And then you put him in the ring with 5 competitors, some of whom you could argue this is their peak, whether it be BB Hulk, or if you're really against the work that Yamato has done in more recent years, there's an argument to be made that this is peak Yamato as well. I think Doi, Yoshino, and Shingo got better as time went along. This is just a phenomenal match. Like Kelly mentioned, the pace they work at, how intense all of this is. There's a moment where Yamato snaps and he hits a spear on, I believe, Hulk that is scary intense. I mean, he flies and lunges at this guy, and it is a Goldberg quality spear, and it is coming from Yamato of all people. The finishing stretch is brilliant. The layout is brilliant. I will give my star rating now. I think this is one of the best matches we have seen up to this point in the promotion. We are over a year into GGUSA's existence. I think this is a better match, not as important of a match, but a better match than the Speed Muscle versus Shima and Ricochet tag from the night before. I think this is better than the Mercury Rising 6-man from WrestleMania weekend. I think this is a 4 3/4 star match. It is other than maybe the Speed Muscle versus Shingo and Dragon Kid tag from the November 2009 show, and Danielson versus Shingo from the 1-year anniversary. This might be the 3rd best match in company history up to this point.
Yeah, Case, again, I was 4 3/4.
Yeah,
my man.
Same.
It's just something like, for this match, and I think Case really hit it on the head, Tozawa here, this is, at least in DGUSA, where he kicks that gear that for the remainder of the tour, the time of DGUSA, because he'd be the one that, even when he went back to Japan, he was listed basically on every single talent announcement that they would have Akira Tozawa. He would become the person that, PWG really was the company that made Akira Tozawa, but he would be putting out such high quality work. And he has the little things that he's gonna eventually get out. He does do the apron Kara Tozawa, which, Case, I know you are not a fan of whatsoever, but
I thought it looked good in this match, though. I thought it was a good spot.
Yeah, the Genki was probably the biggest near fall Genki I think I've ever seen in his career. That's a move he drops, and it's just him stepping onto the stage. And this would have been, I think this DVD might have come out before that Bola did, even though people were already talking online about Akira Tozawa breaking out at Bola, and it just was such a remarkable thing that he was able to kind of get in here. My favorite spot of him in this match, though, was when they had, I think it was Hulk up for a Doomsday device. He ducks down, and Akira Tozawa goes flying and eats it right in the middle of the ring. I'm that's a special kind of person to decide, we're not going to make this work, but I'm just going to fully embrace it and just eat shit on this. But remarkable match. Kelly, I do have one big question to ask you. How did Milwaukee become Naruki Doi country? How is he as mayor of Milwaukee? Because
I don't know. Everyone just went with it. I've never been in a crowd before that was just yes, this is the chant we do, and they just went with it instantly. I have no idea, but yeah, Milwaukee just loves Doi.
And it's something that with Naruki Doi, he started feeding off it even the match itself. It's remarkable. But yeah, this is probably one of the shows I think it falls between the cracks, but I don't think you can miss out on this trios match, and I don't think anyone should miss out on the Moxley Danielson match before this. I think this is one of those special, unique matches that I'll be real interested, Case, when we get to the end of the series, how this holds up, because right now, I'm with you, it's the top 3 match in the promotion's history, and I think that having this in a small venue like the Miramar Theater, where it really looked like you mentioned how hot it was, Kelly, it looked like everyone was on top of each other in this arena, and they were just having a 30-minute, just incredible trios match. It just was something special, and it's something that if you have the WWN Live Network or Club WN, it's dumb name. I say this every time because I always get tripped up on it. You have to go out and see this. If they're looking to put a matchup on YouTube for people to watch, this is a match to put up on YouTube. It's just such a special match, and having Shingo Takagi pin the Freedom Gate champion leading into his match, I think it was in Fall River coming up, was such a smart move and an inversion of expectations, because you think, oh yeah, Hulk's going to pin Tozawa or Yoshina's going to pin Tozawa, and they completely inverted that. And I thought it was an incredibly inventive way of doing it, and I think that's something that Gabe Sapolsky really had his idea on where he was going to go with the Freedom Gate title with that. So I love this match.
Yeah, it's so good. And like Shingo has been in 2 of the 3 greatest matches I've ever been in person for, with this and then him versus Ospreay at the Best of the Super Juniors finals.
That was a flex. I did not know you were in person for that.
I was, yeah.
I'm now very jealous.
It was so cool.
I imagine so. I was watching it on a couch in central Indiana. Not quite as cool, but still a good memory.
Yeah, this is definitely a show that, like, it's amazing how hard these guys worked, considering it's just what was it, 200 some people
200
venue?
on the dot.
Yeah, 200 people in Milwaukee. Like, that's not a big venue, and that's not like a big crowd, but these guys worked it like it was like they were main eventing the Tokyo Dome, you know? It was nuts.
It's a touring match that was put on not like an all-star game, but more like the finals of a playoff series. I mean, it really had that intensity to it, and it is constantly just the best thing about the touring Dragon Gate 6-man tag in whatever incarnation it's in, whether it's Blood Generation versus Do Fixer, Muscle Outlaws versus Typhoon. We have a new generation here in World 1 versus Kamikaze. They just bring it. And I don't know if it's because the way the first one, the Blood Generation Do Fixer match, if that was so well received that it just means something to the Japanese guys now. Or what I think it is it just speaks to their work ethic. I mean, these are guys that at least televised shows, mind you, the house shows are a different story in Japan, but these guys do not take television shows off. I mean, it is just a remarkable effort and work ethic, and just the way they continue to push themselves. I am doing a lot of existential thinking right now, obviously, but something that I have just come to really love about Dragon Gate is their sense of ensemble and their sense of community, and the fact that when things are firing on all cylinders for the promotion, it seems like everybody is in the fight together. And in a weird way, this World 1 Kamikaze match represented everything that I like about the company, on top of the fact that they built a ring together before the show started. I mean, it is top to bottom, in and out of the ring. It is the great side of Dragon Gate being represented on this show.
And on top of all of that, just because I just had the thought peek in my head, because me being the Tozawa super fan, I knew he was like 25 when he had this match. He's the youngest person in this match. The oldest person in this match was 30. And Jeez. It's just something that, like, when you think about this, like, Naruki Doi and Masato Yoshino would have been about 10 years pro, Doi a little bit less so, but they have been around for that long. Actually, no, he did debut in 2000. I don't know why I thought he was a little later. But then, like, the rest of these guys, I mean, Tozawa, 5-year pro, Hulk and Shingo, 6-year pro, and they're having these matches, and I think the ensemble thing, and it's something that even to this day, like, I've grown to, like, whenever people ask about stuff about Dragon Gate, it's like a co-op in a lot of ways, that it's just this traveling ensemble where they put together the rings at every show. So it's very much so like that. It's almost like this was a true Dragon Gate experience, that they had to put together the ring, and they went out here and had what should have been, and I know it's not the case, should have been a match of the year contender in 2010.
Yeah,
I completely
definitely
agree.
Kelly, you didn't give us your star rating. Where you at 4 3/4?
Yeah, 4 3/4.
All right, so somehow I think there was only 2 matches where we were off by a combined half star. So
yeah, we were never more than a quarter star away from each other.
That is wild. So, and one last note, and this goes into the next episode. This is the last time they would be able to do this match in this configuration, because when we start on the next episode talking about the next double shot and all this, the big change is about to hit Dragon Gate really quickly, as just as a tease, Deep Drunkers is about to die. So that's going to change the whole entire landscape, especially, and it'll be a landscape change that has its reaches into DG USA as well. So
Yes, just briefly to run down the card for the next episode, we will be talking about Dragon Gate USA's Bushido Code of the Warrior on October 29th, 2010, on a show that features a four-way freestyle between Eric Cannon, Chuck Taylor, Johnny Gargano, and Ricochet, a singles bout between Homicide and Rich Swann. Masato Yoshino will face the debuting Austin Aries. There will be an I Quit match between Jimmy Jacobs and Jon Moxley. A tag team cluster between Brody Lee and Akibono versus the Osirian Portal. A tag match between Akira Tozawa and Yamato versus Shima and Genki Horiguchi. And then the main event, Dragon Gate's most heated rivalry of all time, at least in the ring. We are talking BB Hulk versus Shingo for the Freedom Gate title.
You know what? I always forget that Akibono did TGUSA, and that makes me a little. That's a wild thing. And it's important that Naruki Doi got like the go home thing where he got everyone to chant Naruki Doi because he would be off this next weekend's show for a good reason, because things are changing in Dragon Gate, and we'll get into that on the next episode. So for a show that, you know, as we all know, there is no B shows in Dragon Gate USA. This would have been like considered a B show. I think other than. Oh, man, I think I like this show more than Untouchable. I think this was the best show of that weekend.
I liked Chicago more. I thought the undercard of this show was just very okay, because Akuma, Ricochet, and Cannon Dragon Kid, while they were fine, didn't do a ton for me. I think Chicago was a little bit more consistent. But, I mean, the last two matches on this show, for historical reasons as well as just entertainment, they're essential viewing if you have not seen them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. So, Kelly, do you have any more thoughts on the show before we take this in for a landing?
Well, I wanted to say, so after the show ended, the World 1 team was kind of just wandering around the venue. And my mom just walked right up to Naruki Doi and, like, poked him on the back. And so we thanked him for the great match. And then I don't know where we got a Sharpie. I think he may have just been carrying it around. And so he signed my ticket. So that was super cool. Ooh. And then we were talking because in Danielson's promo, he said, I'm doing a signing. So I must have said something to my parents. Like, I wonder where that is. And a woman who worked at the venue overheard us. Was like, you want to go to the signing with that guy? Here, let me take you. And she takes us this weird way around the venue. And like the entire time we're walking, I'm thinking, this doesn't seem right. So where we come out of, we're right next to the table. Like she may have taken us backstage essentially. So we're like right next to the autograph table. And in the time we were gone, or in the time we were walking, just this huge line had started. And she's just like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Danielson looks at me and waves us over like he somehow knew exactly what had happened and has me cut in line. And I took a quick picture with him and got my ticket signed. And so that gives me my coolest wrestling artifact, which is a Dragon Gate USA ticket signed by Bryan Danielson and Naruki Doi.
That's outstanding.
That rules. Who was the person on the ticket this time? Because I know that they always had like photos of everyone on it.
I think it's Mike Quackenbush.
Okay.
Ugh, sorry.
Because I couldn't remember if it's Quackenbush or Eric Cannon, because Cannon's the next show, I believe.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's Midwest thing for Cannon. Quackenbush being on it, you know, I mean, they just got the big win at the first year anniversary. I guess the Chikara Sukigun got the honor of being put on those tickets, but that rules. I can just imagine Naruki Doi's like, all right, this is Naruki Doi country. I'm the mayor of Milwaukee. I'm walking around with a Sharpie and signing everything.
Pretty much. He was so sweet too. He's such a nice guy.
You know, I've heard stories about how much Naruki Doi loves wrestling in America. It would make total sense given like the first run of shows, considering how over he was, and like places like Milwaukee are like, nah, we're adopting you. You're now our new native son. So no wonder he loves America so much when he goes and wrestles in Milwaukee. Okay, so I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything you would like to plug before we end the episode?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Comic Geek Kelly with only one K. You can listen to me every Tuesday night on the Panels on Pages podcast. We record live on YouTube, so we start at 9 Central Time. And if you don't feel like listening live, it'll be there in the archives. And I sometimes now still do the WWE pay-per-view reviews at Voices of Wrestling. Only when we need the big guns do I step up these days.
I mean, you kind of have become like you were like the main eventer of the WWE pay-per-views, but because you had I'm gonna hate myself if I didn't ask you. You have the Pop-Tart rating. What Pop-Tart would you give the show?
Ooh, I would go with the hot fudge sundae.
Solid.
Love that one.
Solid.
Yeah.
I randomly got a box of Pop-Tarts. I know that there's a lot of controversy among Voices of Wrestling about if Pop-Tarts are good or not. I like a Pop-Tart occasionally. It was like a random like assortment box of them. And it had the hot fudge sundae, and usually I would not get that. I had that, and I was like, you know what? I actually like this more than the s'mores Pop-Tart, which is my favorite. So
S'mores is like Old Faithful, pretty much.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you again, Kelly. Case, is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah. As always, I'm on Twitter @_InYourCase, and Mike and I both tweet from the Open the Voice Gate account @OpenVoiceGate. I'll take just a second because we're living in whatever the fuck we're living in. StopChicago.org is the website for the Southside Together Organizing for Power organization that has been, I guess, one of the primary things to receive donations from me over the past few days. They do a lot of great work with housing and mental health reform and education on the south side of Chicago, and they desperately need all the help that you can give. So just keep that in mind as you kind of go about your next few days. Any help is appreciated. Either with that organization or just with, I guess, basic humanity at this point. I hope that this podcast offered some sort of distraction from what has been going on. So StopChicago.org is my main plug today, because I'm sure most of you follow me on Twitter anyways, and who gives a shit about that? So once again, it's StopChicago.org if you'd like to help make a difference on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. I'm at Fujihaya. I haven't mentioned it in a long time, and I feel awkward. I have a match listing that people have asked me about that I update for 2020. I'll mention it on the weekly show as well. But that's going to do it here. So thank you again, Kelly, for joining us this week.
Oh, thank you, guys.
And for Case, I'm Mike, and we'll catch you next time on Rewind Rewatch when we go to Falls River, Massachusetts for the Bushido Way of the Warrior card. Take care, everyone.